Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, author of Chorus of a Thousand. And today we're going to be talking about Prince Caspian by C.S. Lewis, the second book in publication order of the Chronicles of Narnia. So, as I had mentioned in my review of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, it's been, at least 15 years or so since I read the seven Narnia books and really gave time to even watching the adaptations. So it's been great to kind of come back and rediscover these stories. Obviously, with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, because I think the general plot of both the book and the movie had still stayed pretty clear in my mind. So with reading, I remembered all of the major beats and characters of that story and just how that particular story flowed. But then when I got to thinking about Prince Caspian, Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, the other books, I I kept drawing a blank. I knew that Prince Caspian is, they return, the Pevensey children return a year later to Narnia to help in the fight of Prince Caspian against his uncle Miraz, and but that was it. That's all I just knew the basics of what Prince Caspian is about. So it was great to get a chance to reread this, but it was almost as if I was reading it for the first time because, again, I have next door to no memory of this story. I will say right off the bat, Prince Caspian is, I think, miles better than Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And here's why. While The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe dealt with, it was children discovering this world. It was a great adventure story. This story is about the preservation of a legacy and returning to a world that has been overrun by despair. But even now you could say, well, isn't that the same as Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? You had the queenship of the White Witch, who cast Narnia into this wintry season. But with Prince Caspian, it's interesting because whereas in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe you had that winter, you still had all the creatures of Narnia uh, in action, and they were all around and everything. And this is the members of old Narnia, the animals, that kind of natural community, if you want to call it that, kind of nature has been practically driven underground by the invasion of these people known as the Telmarines from the land of Telmar. And there's a great deal of fear that is present within this, and fear about recapturing something that some individuals argue never happened or is just a myth, or even if it did happen, it doesn't matter, it doesn't apply to them. And it's through that, and then as the Pevensey children return to a world where they once reigned as kings and queens, to see the world that they knew, that it's been gone for a long time, and then they have to essentially help Caspian fight to help him obtain a kingship that is rightfully his. But yet, they don't do it for themselves, but they do it for the kind of, again, the legacy, the spirit of the land that they once knew. That's what they're almost fighting for. So there's a lot more. I think there is a lot more at stake within this, and it I think it runs off better. Because the Pevensey children, they're not discovering this land, or kind of trying to work out how to deal with one another within this world. They're familiar with it. But at the same time, yes, they are rediscovering it, because so much time, I think like 1,300 Narnian years have passed since the events of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Um, but there is an almost assured quality with which the Pevensey children uh, conduct themselves in this. And as they get more accustomed to being back in Narnia, to understanding the major conflict, to understanding what is at stake for this world, they tap into the parts of themselves that they left behind in Narnia, for which for them was only a year removed, but it's almost as if that year has kind of wiped away uh, the the semblance that they had of being kings and queens, but then coming back to Narnia. That's really started to come into fruition. So again, as I mentioned, the big plot of this novel is that 1,300 years after the events of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the Telmarines have invaded Narnia, kind of driven the old Narnia, or all of these animals, nature, creatures, into underground communities. And this kind of despised Miraz rules, even though his nephew, Prince Caspian, who is the son of King Caspian the Ninth, he's the rightful heir. And Prince Caspian is learning of the legacy of his people, or the legacy that he ought to come into, at the same time building his own. And while I'm hard pressed to find a lot of negatives with this book, I will say, just as I'm getting into the plot here, Caspian, while he has a lot of time to shine, at least at the first half of the book, in the second half, I'm wanting a little bit more. But it's probably up to the reader to just fill in the blanks and to imagine that development, where that will lead off. And obviously, I know Caspian is in a major figure in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, the third book. But that's kind of the setup. He has an advisor, Dr. Cornelius, who informs him that the old Narnia very much so still exists, and that he can tap into that and lead these creatures and lead these people to success, and go up against his uncle to then rightfully, or to step into the role that is rightfully his. And as they're getting into battles, then Caspian uses Susan's horn, which has been kind of passed down and was now given to him, to then bring them back into the land of Narnia. And then again, the Pevensey children find themselves in Narnia. They come back to Cair Paravel, this big castle structure that remains at the cornerstone of their memory. And as they're starting to put together the pieces, that, okay, we're in Narnia, and it feels like we're in a different place, but we're not, as they start to recognize the various landmarks and everything. It's quite fascinating as they do so. And I would say a lot of this book, kind of similar to Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, it goes by so fast. I mean, this is not that long of a book. It's like 240 pages in this mass market version, with copious amounts of illustrations along the way, but which are great. But it's interesting in the way that it's structured, because the Pevensey children, it follows them at first as they're coming back to Narnia, and then they meet this dwarf named Trumpkin, who they save from kind of being captured by a few soldiers or taken prisoner. And then he tells them the story of Caspian, and that's another big chunk. And then for pretty much the rest of the book, it's about the Pevensey children starting to venture into Narnia again, trying to get to Caspian and his army. Uh, and while they are getting reacquainted with the world that they left behind, uh, they also must learn to believe and to trust again. Um, and I might get into I know I've kind of danced around some spoilers here. I think I'm just going to go all spoilers from here on out. So the scenes where they're starting to trek back with Trumpkin, and Lucy sees Aslan. She kind of sees him on the heights, of course. Um, but she's the only one who can see him. Not everybody else can. But eventually, they're able to see him again, and that is where their assurance can grow. They grow more confident, and uh, it's almost like they're tapping back into the wonder that they felt again only a year prior, for them, and it is through that their confidence arises as well. And then I think maybe not consistently from that point forward, but I think even with Peter, he is then referred to constantly as the High King Peter. But he is not a king that is looking to rule for life, this is because this isn't the story of Peter. It's not. Peter has a very interesting role in this, because while The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and in particular in the film adaptation of that, they really lean into Peter at the head of these fights and these battles. And we do get that within Prince Caspian as well, but it's not for the sake of defeating an enemy so he can reign, even though and when that was part of the prophecy of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, the two daughters of Eve and two sons of Adam will sit the throne. And with this, it's almost like he has to be there to then rightfully pass the torch to Caspian. And when you see that change in Peter, it's very interesting. Obviously, it comes when he's writing that big letter to Miraz's army that he will then send with Edmund, and then Edmund goes to treat with them. I would have liked to have seen a little more. I mean, Lucy was great, just as she was as a character in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Same with Peter. I would have liked to, Edmund to kind of break out on his own. Obviously, you had that conflict inherent within the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, with Edmund getting pulled to the side of the White Witch earlier on. Obviously, you don't want to retread that this time, and you do get kind of the inverse a little bit of what happens in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when Lucy goes into Narnia a couple of times, and Edmund follows in right behind her. But then when they come back to Earth, he just says, he just pushes it aside of, oh, I was just playing around. Weren't we just playing, Lucy? Like, Narnia is not real. I was just playing along with your imagination. A kind of a big dick move for a brother to say to his little sister. But in this, Edmund is kind of right with Lucy in terms of believing what she is saying. He's the first to believe her, the first to go along with her. So it was nice to see that. And maybe that's a minor criticism. Again, this is just, it's it's better in a way, because you're dealing with Prince Caspian having to come into the legacy that is rightfully his, for the Pevensey children to rediscover the legacy and their legacy and the consequences of it, and then what they can do to help the others, to help Caspian fulfill his destiny. And then when that's done, they bow out. But then to help Narnia come into its own again, for the old Narnia to flourish like it did. And that will be interesting too as I get into the other books. I mean, obviously the next one is Voyage of the Dawn Treader, but to see, can that old Narnia quality that kind of comes to life again at the end of Prince Caspian, can that be maintained again? And I'm not sure. But that'll be very interesting. I also felt it was interesting too that with the final duel between Peter and Miraz, that it was Peter and Miraz. It wasn't Caspian. An interesting moment for, I mean, well, Peter, I think, was doing it mainly as a gesture to Caspian to say, I will fight this for you because you're the rightful heir. I don't want you to be harmed in case something happens to me. So Peter is, even more so than Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, he is more than willing to lay his life down in this, which was very interesting. And then, of course, the reveal at the end that the Telmarines are from Earth, and Caspian is a son of Adam. Where it seemed like they were pirates or a seafaring society on Earth, and then were transported into Narnia and into the land of Telmar, and then they invaded Narnia, and so all the hesitancy that Caspian might, or that he kind of exemplified towards the end, then he feels assured and confident as he becomes king. So yeah, I mean, this is it's much different than Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. I mean, obviously you can point to the similarities of Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but it's just because of the dual nature of the two kinds of legacy, of old Narnia being driven underground, whereas they weren't really in Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, but they're fearful. And not only that, but the stories of the adventures of the Pevensey children have fallen into myth. They have great fear because they don't know, what kind of legacy or what kind of inspiration they can draw from what the Pevensies did for them, 1,300 or so years ago, because for them, that is myth, that is in the past, and you can't access that. Some believe that, and as they say, well, what about the White Witch? Well, in the stories, it seemed like she kind of knew what she was talking about. So why don't we try to bring the White Witch back instead of Aslan? So there's that moment too, where when you are so removed from an event, and then that might muddle the either the truth of what happened, or because then if you assume it to be a myth, then it's not that it's all relative, but it's all, it's all on equal playing ground. It has no consequence if you start talking about certain things, because if a lot of them assume it to be a myth, but then of course there are the misconceptions that history falling back many generations into the future can bring about, because nobody really fully understands the truth, and it's up to the Pevensies to kind of tap into who they once were, to act that way for the good of Narnia. So yeah, quite interesting. Again, this gets a high recommendation from me. It's just because of those things. I think this is a much more well thought out, well developed story than Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Looking forward to seeing where else the adventures of the Pevensey children go in the future, and where this all will end up. So, Prince Caspian, if you have read it, let me know what you think. And as always, I will see you guys next time.